you're joining me this early, this is the part of the show where I spend messing around with all of my equipment. Okay, I think we're going to go with that. So how's it going, everybody? My name is Barry Stevens, Vulcan Glass Art Studio. You know that. Today we're going to be working on some just hollow projects, jars, dishes. We're going to try some fun stuff that I haven't done in a while, and we'll see how it goes. So my warm-up project's going to be a dish. I'm just straightening my point a little bit. And then we're going to pull this down. All right, so we're going to do a simple wrap and rake. Actually, a little bit bigger than I meant it to be. Pull some of that off. Take our first color, which I'm 90% sure is double amber purple, though it's a weird off color, so there's a couple other candidates. Make sure the piece I'm going to be sticking it to is preheated. Touch to the end and rotate. Got to hold that color in the flame. I just kind of twist it back and forth as I'm rotating my main piece. How fast you rotate, how evenly you rotate, and how you're holding the glass in the flame will all dictate your stringer's width and how much is getting put on. So if you're spinning really fast, you'll get a whole bunch of little tiny stringers. If you're spinning a little bit slower, you get some slightly thicker ones that are a little bit more defined. So I like to just kind of do it all. Now we're going to have probably black. So because there's like 60 colors that look like black, it could be like any number of colors. So when I have colors that I no longer know what they are, I have a specific spot in my little bench for those colors. And then when I'm doing projects that don't really matter what the colors are, as long as, you know, they're vaguely close to whatever I think they are, I just use those. Because a single batch of not black in a black project can absolutely ruin it. So you have to be kind of careful not to mix your colors or get them mixed up as to what they are. And I suck at that, so I've got a really big bucket of random colors that I don't know what they are. All right, I actually think I am going to rake this a little bit. Definitely something I should have done ahead of time. But my planning skills kind of suck. So now rather than heating the whole thing in a rotation, I want to heat down one side. And I'm going to just touch the clear to the top and push it through all the color. Bring it around. Opposite way. And do the same thing on the other side. And I'm bouncing it because I basically have to keep the tip of my clear rod nice and hot so that it runs down the piece properly. But I also want to keep both the spot where the rod is touching the glass hot and the spot that's going to be hit next, all at a good melty temperature. Yes, melty is the technical term. I'm going to stick with it. All right. Let's see. So yeah, you can kind of see there how it's feathered or raked or any of the other 60 terms that you can use for that one. So now the spot on the very tip of the piece is always going to have like a bunch of crap on it because you're both hitting that as your termination point on your clear, but it was also the point where you attached your color. So it's always going to be kind of, well, not always, but usually going to be kind of blobby. So we're just going to pull that off. And now we're just going to melt this all in. So this live stream is sponsored by the Webster's Dictionary, and words such as blobby. You're going to get a whole bunch of those. So the glass tube that I started with is a little bit smaller or thinner than a lot of the tubes that I could have chosen to use. So in this process, I want to try to let it gather itself down a little bit so that it becomes a little thicker before I blow it out. And that's also why I use such a long point instead of like kind of a short, thicker one. And I'm using this thin tube because it doesn't have a whole ton of applications. So when I have a good application for it, I should use it. All right, it's got all out of shape. So I just puff in a little bit, and that kind of evens things out just a tad. Now we're going to blow our bubble that is going to be the basis of our dish. You don't want that bubble to be too big or too thin. Once it's cooled down a little bit, we're going to put a bottom on it. And all I'm doing there is just smush it on the marver. Now comes the time we're going to take it off the tube. So first I want to add a handle to the bottom. For that I'm doing a cold seal. As you saw, I heated the handle, but not the piece. So when I touch the two together, it creates a seal, but it's a real weak seal that you'll see later on in the process will pop right off without taking a giant chunk of glass with it. So now I want to heat that section right where the color meets the clear. And once all that texture is melted in, I'm actually going to pull and blow into it at the same time, and that's going to cause the glass to get really thin. And it'll make it real easy for it to pop, thus opening up our piece. And then we flame cut. All right, it's a little uneven, so if I can find my scissors, I'm gonna cut it. Oh, nice. So it's getting nice and hot. You can just cut off the tall parts. So now I'm going to add a lip wrap. And lip wrap serves a couple purposes. One is that it looks real pretty. But more importantly, it adds just a little bit of structure to the outer rim of this piece, so that when I start to spin it, to flare it open, in theory, it won't go all crazy on me. So all I'm trying to do is lay a pretty thick but nice even line of color all the way around the rim of the piece. All right, that lip wrap was actually thicker than most, so I want to take a second to melt it in. And now I'm going to heat the top half or so of this piece. Once it gets nice and hot, we're going to start to spin it. That's going to flare from kind of a jar shape into a dish. And we spin. This one's being a little more stubborn than most, but there we go. I don't know if they're necessarily special scissors for glass blowing or just shears that they market to glass blowers. There's nothing really special about them. They're just a metal that, can handle it, can handle the heat without warping. So I just tap that off. Hi, JJ. And we'll go ahead and melt in. So when I tapped that off, that was why I wanted to do a cold seal. So now there's just this tiny little divot that got taken with that piece. I can heat that up. Set it on the Marver again. And you got your dish, which you can see that inside pattern there is from actually raking it out. Looks kind of cool. All right. So for the next project, we're going to do that same style of wrap and rake, but this time we're going to do, it's going to be a jar, like an actual jar. And I think I even have corks. So basically at the end of every one of these shows, I do a video of all the products that were made during the session, so you guys can actually see them the way they're supposed to look after they're out of the kiln and everything. So if I have corks, I will definitely have corks in my jars. I'm gonna do a couple different jars today. I'm gonna do just like a stock standard vase style jar, and then I want to do like a beaker jar. I've never done a beaker jar, so I guess we're trying that first time on stream, which is always fun. All right, first things first, we're going to pull a point. Well, first things first, we're going to fix this point, and then we're going to pull a point. And all I'm doing there is getting it to where it's hot enough that it technically moves, and then just kind of straighten it as best I can in my hand. And now we'll go ahead and pull it down. So this is a different tube. This is a thicker tube, 32 millimeter extra heavy wall, 4 millimeter thick wall thickness. So the project itself has to be a little bit bigger anyways. So it's going to be the same size point, but I'm going to get much more glass actually into the project by starting with a thicker tube that's also heavier. Clean it up just a little bit. Now the last project, the finished product you generally see inside out. So the color that I laid down first was the color that you would end up seeing on top in the final product. So last time I laid my probably double amber purple on top so that you would see it first. This time, you're going to see the outside of the product instead of the inside. So I want to lay down my background's color first. So I'm going to take my Pretty Sure Black. Same thing. I got to be careful how long you spend doing that. If your piece gets too cold, when you then go to reheat it, like I just did, a bunch of your rings will actually pop off. So we're going to do definitely regular amber purple, and then probably a touch of double amber, probably double amber purple at the end. So the regular amber purple I want to lay on a little bit more thin, just for aesthetic reasons. So I rotate my piece much quicker. And we'll take my unnecessarily short piece of probably double amber purple and just kind of do one pass. I'm doing it nice and slow and letting it get some thick spots. So there'll be some nice kind of random variation in the final product. All right. No, it's I don't know if it's black. I think it's black. I'm pretty sure it's black. but it could be black, it could be Dragon's Eye, it could be Turbo Cobalt, it could be Onyx, it could be Raven, it could be Ninja. You know, there's like a million colors that look like black. So when I don't know what it is, I put it in a different place, and it's probably black. So pretty sure it's black is not its official name, but that particular stick may as well be pretty sure it's black because I will never mix it with any of my definitely blacks for fear of ruining my piece, which I've done more times than I care to admit. So now I'm going to do a pretty tight pattern on this. So I want to do a kind of a halfway thing where I try to do as close to the halfway mark as possible. Which I totally didn't get. That's okay. Oh, that wasn't bad. And split that in half. And you notice that on all of these, I'm going the same direction. Well, that was less good. And split that in half. All right, so you can see the pattern has now kind of comfortably, it's kind of comfortably been split. So now we're going to split it one more time in the same direction. And this whole time, you kind of have to be careful not to get it too hot, or it will start to bend in the direction that you're doing all this work. Now it's been split a bunch. And now I'm going to do the opposite direction between each of those. That piece got too short. I don't feel like burning my hands over this piece. I'm not that committed. Two more. End up burning my hand anyways. Not really. All right. So now you have all that color really nice and swirled up in there. So first we're going to get rid of the giant chunk of glass that's on the bottom, same as we did on the last project. And now we want to gather basically all of it back up. The base of your jar is the part that holds whatever it is you're putting in there. So you want to make sure that's nice and big. The more evenly you can heat this particular spot, like part of the thing, the more evenly you can heat the whole piece, and the more deeply you can let that heat soak in so that things really melt together, the easier the rest of your project will be. It does not pay to skimp at this particular stage. All right, that's pretty good. Blow into it. Add your bottom, same thing as we did in the last project. Now this time, however, it's a little bit more important how you melt in that section above your jar base, bubble chamber, whatever you want to call it. So add your cold seal. And this time you want to focus your heat not so much at the edge where the color meets the clear, but where the color that's not fully melted in starts. And you're going to be heating the whole thing, but you really want to focus your heat right there. And again, don't skimp. Spend some time, let it all soak in. You don't want to pull. I'm actually pushing ever so slightly so that that doesn't get any thinner. Because I want it to get a little bit thinner in a second, but I want it to do it when and how I want it to be done and not when the glass wants it to be done. All right, so now everything's pretty much melted in. So I want to take it out of the flame and let it draw down ever so slightly. Right, like that. And I want to focus pretty close to the jar because we are going to flare this out, but you don't want it to be an enormous flare. We're going to do that same thing where I pull and blow and get it nice and thin and then flame cut it. All right, so once again, we're at a lip wrap. To curl in, so I wanted to pop it back out so that I had a nice flat surface. Going to use that same color. Yeah, see, that black is not in fact black. It is a very deep blue. Same process as before. Melt that lip wrap in. And this time, what do I have right now? We're going to use you. Oh, nope, that's what I was looking for. So this time, rather than flaring it just by spinning really quickly, I want to kind of manually do it. And that'll give me just a little bit more control over the final shape. And you obviously want to do a lot less of a flare. And make sure it's as circle as possible. And that's where that whole melting the neck for a long time and then pulling, it keeps that inner circle nice and circular. Not perfect, but it's pretty close. Tap it off. Get rid of the scar. That is your jar. It's tea, not beer. Ooh, it's a little hotter out here than I thought it was going to be. All right. So next project, we're going to do a Christmas ornament. We're going to do it a little bit differently. So I just got to grab some frit. All right, so what I got was some double amber purple, some jet black, and some blue moon. So we're going to mix those together. And I'm going to go heavy on the black. So now I have that mixture in my little, I don't even know what that's called, frit tray. Can't read the screen in my shade 5s. Now we're going to pull another point. So this time, all of our colors are actually going to be done on the inside of the clear. So I want to open this up. Flare it open. Now we're going to take our frit tray and just kind of pour it in. And then we start at the base of the piece and work our way up. And you want to get it hot enough so that the frit begins to stick to the inside of your tube right before it starts like moving like a lot. And once it starts to stick, you move down to the next section. Residual heat will kind of cause it to stick to the previous section. And you keep doing that all the way down the piece. All right, so I didn't quite have enough frit to cover the whole thing, so we just add more. Gravy boat. It's called a gravy boat. I don't eat gravy, so I would have no idea what that's called. I've been calling it the Pori frit tray, so which while descriptive is probably not terribly accurate. All right, so once it's all been added in, I pour the rest back into the gravy boat or Pori frit tray, whichever you prefer. And then we're going to close this up. Now I'm just preheating everything while I try to remember what the next step is. I think we pull it down. Okay, so I do little points on my ornaments. So that's the first thing we're going to do is pull down the whole point. Go ahead and melt a handle. Focus our heat on the bottom. The main thing of pretty much all hollow work is that you need to heat it longer than you think you do. Early on, you have trouble because once it starts moving a lot, you think, okay, it's hot enough, I'm done, and it's not. It never is. So right now, I'm not only heating this up as like a structural thing for the next, step in the piece, but I also have to melt all that frit in. Because if you don't, it creates a whole bunch of stress in your piece that will cause your piece to explode later, in theory, sometimes, but enough that you don't want to do it. So once it's all melted in, kind of pull it down. If you've been here for any of my pipe streams, it's very similar to how you're pulling down a stem on a piece. However, see how they got that nice taper shape? That's kind of what I'm looking for. I'm going to add a little disc. All we're doing there, it's called a Maria. It's just heating one specific spot, get it nice and hot, and push evenly together. That creates a lot of cold stress, so you have to spend a second reheating above and below the actual disc so that you don't have cold marks, which is just it kind of looks like a frostiness on the glass, but not like the intentional frostiness that you guys see on other products. That's sandblasted. This is just like a random, not attractive frostiness. And that's caused by glass being moved when it's too cold. So now I want to slowly heat from that disc up because the rest of this piece has gotten cold, and because of that frit, it is super prone to cracking. So by slowly heating from the hottest point to the coldest, I'm reducing the chance of that cracking on me. If I just like shot over to where the handle is and immediately heated that up, there's a pretty high chance that the whole thing's going to crack, which, you can still save, but not cracking pieces is better than cracking them. So, yeah. All right, pull off the handle. Now we're going to shape the bulb. So again, you want to make sure that you heat this for a good long time. Let everything soak in. And you want to heat all the way up to that disc. Once it's nice and hot, go ahead and blow it out. So can glass explode when heated? Yes and no. So yes, it absolutely can. If you have something that is completely cold, and so say I didn't melt that frit in all that way, and then I just set the piece down and let it sit there for a minute, and then I immediately put it back into the flame, it would pop. I mean, it would literally just pop and go everywhere. So, but at the same time, like You don't do that. Like, because it will explode, you just don't let things. And like, there's so many stages before it explodes. Like, at different heat levels, it'll just crack slightly. And so when you're trying to avoid ever letting it get to the point where it's going to crack, it getting to the point where it's going to explode it's a far cry from that. The only time things really just explode on you is really crappy colors. So what I'm doing is I'm making the loop, and then I'm going to attach it on the top. But like sometimes you'll get a really bad batch of color, not very often, and usually not any of the major companies, but a lot of like home pulled color kind of sucks sometimes. So like if you make a piece out of it and then you're heating up the thing, sometimes the whole thing goes pop and everything will just fly everywhere. I remember the first couple batches of pink slime that came out. A couple of people had very expensive pieces explode on them using it. So all I'm doing now is just shaping my loop. So the two other colors I used are not going to pop up until it's in the kiln, if they pop up. So this just looks black. All right. So now I'm going to take it off. I want to do this very carefully because basically I'm going to be creating a vacuum inside this piece, which is generally something you don't want to do. But I do for this product. So when doing that thing that you're not supposed to do, you need to do it very carefully. So I heat this up, pull it down. It's still completely hollow. There's still an opening to the air on the other side. I have to let a lot of that rim there cool so that it won't suck the glass back in when I finally close it. So you do this a few times. And then let everything cool and pull it off. And that's it. Once it's gotten there, you can't heat it anymore. So if I had heated that anymore, because the piece was completely closed, which again, don't usually want to do, as soon as you heat it, the vacuum will cause the glass to suck in, and it won't do it evenly, and it'll look really ridiculous and bad. And if you heat it enough, it'll actually suck in until there's a hole that will pop in the glass, which you sometimes try to do in other weird circumstances, but generally not a good idea. Okay. So now we're going to do some Encalmo stuff. To be more specific, we're going to make a beaker jar. So what Encalmo is basically just taking different bubbles of glass and stacking them one on top of each other, and then you blow it out and even the whole thing out. It becomes one piece. It's Encalmo. If you've ever seen any of my wigwag work, which if you're here you probably have, that's all Encalmo. So like this piece here, you can really easily see it. How it's just different wigwags that are kind of like stacked on top of each other. That's an encalmo. So we're going to do a beaker jar like that. I've got a couple colors heating up. I haven't really decided what I'm doing with those yet. We'll figure that out. But the main thing is that I know I'm going to want to have two. If they're going to be that thin, though. I think I was going to use lip wrap for that. Okay. I don't tend to think about these pieces a whole lot ahead of time. I just kind of like decide, oh, hey, I'm going to do an encalmo piece today. And then I like get there and realize that when you're on camera, it's probably not the time to be like, well, wait, what do I want to do exactly? Welcome to the creative process. It's a lot of standing around twiddling your thumbs, looking at color, and trying to figure out what you want to put together to make things that look pretty. All right, so we're going to start by making our various different bubbles. So I have this heating up. It's going to be a very sparkly jar. So I'm actually just going to split this in two, basically, and blow it out into two nice, even bubbles. So just kind of adding a handle to one side, and then we'll split it right down the middle. So this is, I don't remember the name of this color, but basically it has a little bit of a sparkle to it, not a ton. So I'm going to use this for the top and bottom of the beaker, and then there's going to be a black line separating the blue from the next color. And the next color is going to be a kind of magenta dichro. I have a little bit left over that I can't think of anything to do with, and this seems like a cool use of it. So as previously stated, this is probably going to be a very sparkly piece. So I'll toss that back in the kiln. We'll heat this up and blow it out. So for anyone watching, if you want to see what these projects look like when they're cooled and when they're, in their full glory, I will do a post on my Facebook, Vulcan Glass Art Studios, and then also a short video on this page, the YouTube page, tomorrow with pictures of all of those. And everything is for sale. So if you see something that's really cool and you like it, think about getting it. Except probably the marble. I think I'm going to be doing a marble at the end of all this, and that I am going to be auctioning off in the Facebook group, either Black Market Marbles or Marbles and Things, probably Black Market Marbles. All right, so this tube is a little shorter than would be ideal. It's a little hot. All right, so we have that fairly evenly blown out. We don't want it to be too thin, but we want it to be a nice bubble, a nice, comfortable, smooth, even-walled shape. Now we're going to go ahead and pop a hole. Now, since most of my glass that I'm using in this project is the kind of color tubing where you basically take colored rods and put it on the inside of clear, there's an outer lip of clear. I want to get rid of that. For the same reason, again, if you've watched my pipe streams, you've seen me pick off the edge of a wigwag, same thing. This helps keep a clear line from forming at the intersection of each of your different pieces of Encalmo. All right, cool. All right, so I'm going to add a tube handle to that piece of Dichro. It's pretty small, and I don't feel like melting my hand off trying to use it. So this stuff I want to be careful not to thin out too much, or the Dichro is going to lose a lot of its effect. So that's going to make the wall thickness on this piece necessarily pretty thick. It's not bad. There's a little imperfection in the rim of my handle tube, and when I heated it, it cracked all the way down, which happens. All right, so now I want to make a bubble of black. And I'm basically going to use it. I'm going to take a tube of black and then section off parts of that tube to separate the colors in my Encalmo piece. It's a little hard to explain, but you'll see hopefully how it goes at the end. So for that, I'm going to do a coil pot. Anyone who's ever worked with pottery probably knows what this is all about. I'm basically just going to be heating my black, going around the tube, and just keep laying the black down over itself. It's a very slow and not awesome way of making tube, mainly because you then have to spend forever evening it out, and it's not exactly a quick process to begin with. So if you can avoid it, it's better to. But it's fine for like small sections of tube like this that I'm using. So now I got to heat it up really hot, and then we got to kind of blow into it and even this whole mess out. So the first puff is just to spread everything out, and then we're going to put it on the angle marver and blow into it, which will help even those walls out even further. And then pop a small hole in the top. All right, so this is our last little piece here. Well, not really, but our last piece of blue. Yeah, we'll do that. So I want to gather the whole thing up and blow it into a nice bubble just like I did on the others. So this is probably going to be the top of our piece once all is said and done. So we want to make sure this is completely even as even as possible. And usually that just means soaking in the heat forever. Okay. So now I want this to be right in the center where I pop this hole. So rather than what I've done before and blowing the hole out, I'm actually going to pick it out, at least partially. All right, so now we got a nice hole right in the center. We're going to take our black that we just made, attach some. Now we're going to pull almost all of it out. I want a tiny little bubble of black. See how there's just a tiny little bit? Because in the final product, I basically want this to be a line. I don't want it to be a defining feature. Now we just got to melt that in and puff it back out. Because the black is such a dense color, you got to be careful. Or that black can end up just becoming so solid that it doesn't really blow out at all. Not bad. So now we're going to do the same thing and pick out the center. I want to flare that open. So now when I put the next Encolmo on, it's going to be, or next bubble on for this piece, it's going to be annoying to melt that in and to get that all to even itself out, but it will leave that nice crisp line that I was looking for. So from here on out, that's the piece that we're going to be stacking pieces onto. So this is the next, this is going to be the center color, and it's got a nice sparkle to it. I know you probably can't see it in the camera. But I want to gather a bunch of this up. So now we're just going to spend some time getting a large section of it hot and just kind of letting it soak in and letting it gather up on itself. Probably occasionally blow into it to keep everything straight and looking the way we want. But I think we're going to probably use around a third to a half of this piece of tube. Also, because it's dichro, you have to be a little careful not to overheat it or it'll fry out. And then we have no sparkle, which is not what we're looking for. Anytime I'm blowing something out on the marver like that, it's basically to try to even the wall thickness of the piece that I'm working with, and thus even out the entire piece a little bit more. So I was noticing that this was starting to blow out thinner on one side than the other. So by doing that, I can even that whole process out. All right. So now we'll pluck out a hole on that side. So this is the same kind of tube where I need to make sure I tear off the edge. Now we're going to add it to our other piece. And then we'll take our tube off. So for ease of everything, I'm going to actually add a blow tube onto the end of this. This will allow me to actually look at the piece while I'm blowing it out, which a lot of times is not super important. Like you've been doing it long enough, you know what's going on. But for this piece, because I have that incredibly thin joint that is a different color than everything else, I want to be able to see what I'm doing. Just a little bit better. So what I'm going to be doing here is basically heating it up and evening it out until all of this tube of 3 different colors that are 3 different densities are all one thickness. Don't inhale while you're blowing glass. You asked what would happen if you inhale. Don't. That's big no-no. The glass has a whole bunch of compounds on the inside of the tube that are not ideal to be in your lungs. Hence the ventilation system. Plus, if you're working with frit and stuff like that, and that gets into your system, you can get silicosis, which is it's like glass version of heavy metal poisoning. It sucks, so don't do that. So it's a slow process. You really have to do this all very carefully, mainly because of that black line that I put in there. It looks cool, but it does make the whole process a lot more difficult. But you can see it's starting, that super thin connection point has now thickened up. It's close to the same diameter as the rest of the piece. All right. So now you can see the tube is all one thickness, one diameter. So I just want to do that one or two more times to ensure that everything is the right thickness and it doesn't just appear to be. The more even you make the piece after each individual step, the less you'll hate yourself later in the process. That is pretty good. All right, pluck out the bottom again. Pull off the end. You got your first piece. You got the blue, black line, dichro magenta. Now I'll set that in the kiln. Take our little piece of black tube. And we want to repop the hole. First, we want to reheat the whole thing. and make sure that it's back to being one uniform thickness all the way through. Pluck out the hole. Okay. Take our piece, add our next black line. And then make sure only a very small amount of that black actually is left behind. Same as we did before. Even everything out again. Make sure that black is nice and melted in. Pluck it open. All right, and we got our next piece. So now we take our last piece of blue that we made all those forevers agos and attach it. Take that off its tube. Now we just want to clean that up, make sure that that clear that we have there is gone. Now that end of this end of the blue piece is a little bit thicker than everything else because it was attached to the tube, so the blow point wasn't thinning that spot out as much. So before I try to melt anything in, I want to heat that entire thing up and even it out a little bit more. Now it's been evened out a little bit, so we can start on the process of getting rid of that neck. And this is the same lengthy, boring process of every one. All pretty much because of that little black line in the center. But it looks cool, so like, I don't know, maybe worth? We'll see how worth it is in the final product. So I want to gather this whole thing up a little bit. So that I can then do the, I'm not even going to try to explain it. You'll see how it happens, where I actually form this into the beaker. And you really want to gather this up quite a bit. The next step is going to actually point it down and blow into it so that it kind of stretches and blows out at the same time. That's what's helped makes the beaker. That's what helps make the beaker shape. So you want to have it pretty condensed, and also the ability to heat like the whole thing at once before you start. All right, that's pretty good. Now we're going to heat this whole thing up. I'm going to kind of put it down like that and blow, and it's going to stretch and open at the same time, in theory. Okay. Now we're going to heat this bottom section and do the exact opposite motion. So now I have to heat it up, put it on the marver, blow and push at the same time. I do a different marver for that, so I will show you what that looks like once it's done. That defines the bottom real nice. Now I'm holding it at a slight downward angle so that a divot forms in the bottom. Add a handle. Now we're going to open the piece up. Same way as we've done on all the others. So I still want to have a lip wrap on this, so I'm going to use black just to kind of tie everything together. But I'm going to do a much thinner one than I've done before. And we're going to do the slightly more controlled version of using the tool, which is just a graphite reamer. And then I'll flare it a little bit at the very end. I think it's a little bit more of a beaker shape. Tap off that bottom. Get rid of the scars always. And you got your little beaker jar. Okay, I'm going to do another dish because that piece took a bit out of me. So I'm going to make a recovery piece. So we're going to do this dish a little bit differently. We're going to go ahead and use some frit to do a good chunk of the coloring. Thank you. Yeah, I think actually once that comes out of the kiln, the colors are going to look really cool on it. Because right now that sparkle in the blue doesn't really show up, and it's kind of hard to see the magenta dichro part. But it's going to look really good when it's cooled down. All right, so I'm going to put some Blue Moon frit on this one. And dump it in my gravy boat / Porry's frit tray. I'm going to get the outside of this tube nice and hot. And then just kind of roll it in the frit. And you can see how that covered a good chunk of my piece with frit. See if I can go a little higher. Nope, that's as high as it's going to go. So now we want to even our tube out and make sure that it's nice and straight again. And then we're going to start adding color. Just got a batch of sea slime. I think it'll look cool with the Blue Moon. And then I'm going to get some cobalt blue. Cobalt blue, I want the stringers to be a lot more thin, so I'm going to rotate a little bit more quickly. All right, take that blob off the bottom as usual. Now I'm going to melt everything in. I don't actually want to rake this piece. I feel like it looks good enough on its own, and I also don't want to put streaks or anything through the frit layer that I put down. So we're just going to melt this whole thing in and create our ball. Because the frit, when I put it on there, kind of causes divots and indentations in the glass, it makes it so it doesn't necessarily melt down quite as smoothly. So you got to take some time and then blow into it and make sure that your glass is a nice even thickness. Blow into it. Then we will make our bottom. Add our handle. We'll go ahead and open our tube. Clean that up a little bit. And then we'll add a lip wrap. I think I'm going to add a sea slime lip wrap. It's a cool color. Heat the top half up. Once it's nice and hot, spin it. I don't think my handle's quite straight, so the spin might be interesting. Oh no, that was fun. So I don't know if you can see. Kind of. It's a whole bunch of little specks of blue all on the inside of this dish. You'll see that better in the photos tomorrow. Tap off the handle. Clean up the scar. And we got a dish. So I think that's going to be it for the hollow projects for today. I am going to do a Vortex Dichro marble. Then I'm going to be auctioning off on Black Market Marbles probably tomorrow. So that is going to be the rest of today's project. So if for some reason you're here to see hollow work specifically and hate solid work, now's the time to log off. All right, so it's going to be a couple minutes to get everything together, and we'll be ready to go. Okay, so for the Vortex marble, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a cone, and then I put that piece of Dichro in the kiln to preheat it. And then we'll attach that to the outside. I'm going to try something cool with this one that I have absolutely no idea if it's going to work or not, but I'm going to back the Dichro with black, and then right along the rim I'm going to just put some white, so it should be like a fade white into black background to the Dichro. And that may look really cool, or it may look really stupid, I don't know. We're going to try it. So we take our angle marver, and we're just kind of slowly rotating our little glob of glass on the angle marver to get that cone. I want that cone to be a little bit bigger on this piece because my piece of dichro is pretty sizable. All right, awesome. Set that aside for a second. Grab our piece of dichro. We're going to attach this to a 4mm rod. When you're working with your dichro, you don't ever actually want to hit the metal. So dichro is basically a metal that's attached to the outside, attached to one side of the glass. And the side of the glass that's attached to is the side you never, ever, 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 ever want to hit with the flame. So you're kind of hitting the opposite side of the glass that it's on. And that's how you're heating it up. But direct heat will cause the dichro to fry and look bad. All the sparkle will just kind of become scuzzy. So I'm going to attach it. I'm going to roll it on and then snip it. And then take off that excess. And then roll that top down. What I'm doing by rolling it like that is I'm causing the clear glass to cover the seams of the glass that has the dichro attached to it, so that no matter what, dichro will always be under some clear throughout the rest of this process. All right, so now that I've got my dichro on there, I want to reshape my cone. Maintaining your cone is super important. I recone after every step, basically. I don't think you actually have to recone after every single step, but I found that doing it makes sure that I never accidentally forget to have a spot that's, a perfect cone. So now we're going to back our dichro. I want this back to be very little. So I'm pushing hard and moving very fast. So that not very much black gets laid down. And I want that nice line of white. So I just laid 2 white stringers next to the black. Now we're going to melt this all in and cone it down. All right, so now I'm going to actually create the twist in my vortex. And I want to make sure that I focus my heat on the thick section, because the thin section will just get cooled or hot naturally. That's too short. Or something not that short. And then we want to twist so that the white is inside our twist. So you kind of slowly create this twist. You don't want to overdo it, especially with the dichro, or it won't quite look right. All right, now we've got our twist in there. So now it's time to recone. From here on out, it's very important to make sure that when you recone, it cones down to a very sharp point. And then in the next step, when I'm going to cover everything, you have to make sure that you cover your glass goes on real thick around that point so that you can preserve that cone as you turn this into a marble. And a fatter, shorter cone is generally better than a longer, thinner cone. Because if a short, fat cone is already part way to a marble, so that's kind of what you're aiming for. I aim for. You can aim for whatever you want. All right. So you can kind of see you got your twist of color. Inside there's the dichro. And you got that nice kind of white line that goes right along the edge of the whole vortex. So hopefully that'll look really cool. So now we're going to add on, we're going to cover it all up. We're going to take all the work that we've done so far and we're going to cover it up. Because all that work is only supposed to be seen from the inside. So follow the ridge. Right around that edge, you want it to be super thin. And then lay it down just a little thicker in the next slot. And a little thicker in the next one. And all that really entails is slowing down and letting the glass gather up on itself as you lay it down instead of stretching it out. And once you get to the edge of the cone, you want to just lay it on really, really thick. And then go beyond just the cone and lay extra glass at the end. So what that does is you've got your work covered up. It's still in a cone, but it's not It's not down a super sharp point. So now, when we make this into a marble shape, the cone on the inside will be preserved a little bit better because we added all kinds of glass around it, so that that will smooth out and the cone will stay relatively still on the inside. So we're going to heat this up and marble it down. This one's going to be another big old 1.5 to 2 incher. All right, so now we got the back of our marble. We're going to go ahead and add the pattern now. Actually, no, I lied. We're going to add the pattern later. So you can add the pattern now, or you can add it after you put the lens in. And the only major difference is by adding it now, it would have a chance of spreading a little and altering slightly. I don't really want that, so we're going to push in the lens first. So I used blue as my attachment handle color because it's the same color as the back. So when I take it off, if it leaves anything behind, which the handle often does, at least it'll just be blue and you won't even see it. If you do clear, sometimes there's like a very, very, very slight effect where you can sort of see the clear a little bit. It doesn't really look bad or anything. Sometimes it does, but not usually. But to avoid that altogether, I used a blue handle. So now you can see all I'm doing is kind of heating that section right where the color meets the clear and just pushing a lens in. As I've stated before, I like to have at least half, if not 2/3 lens to back pattern. I found that that kind of makes the magnifying effect the best. If you do more lens than that, it flattens your back pattern out a little bit too much, and you end up losing some of the tunnel vortex thing, and it kind of opens it up. Still looks cool, but I prefer to have a little bit more tunnel in there, and so I stick with 1/2 to 2/3 clear to 1/3 or 1/2 back color. All right, that should be good. So now you want to focus, you can kind of see how it's like a mushroom. You want to focus your heat on that seam. Right now it's where color meets clear, it usually is. And right now it's kind of goes, eh. and you want it to get to a swoop. And once it becomes a swoop, you can hit it through the marble mold, seam it out, do it again. You do that 3 or 4 times, and this thing will actually turn into a full, nice round marble. And then we will add our back pattern to the whole dealie. All right, it's kind of become a swoop. I'm going to switch over to our bigger but irritatingly hot 1.5 and 2 inch molds. Don't set your molds under your torch. So remember, at this point, I still haven't seen if that Dichro Vortex looks good. I've done it a million times, so there's a pretty good chance that it looks awesome. But with this project, you're like way over halfway, probably 2/3 of the way through with it, before you even see if the main focal point of the marble looks anything like you wanted it to. That's kind of a theme in glass, where you don't end up seeing how cool something is a lot of times until the next day. So we're almost down. We've almost got this to a regular marble shape, and then we get to do the ridiculously complicated back that I had planned. It's not ridiculously complicated. It's complicated. And the main reason you're taking your time in doing that particular process rather than just like forcing it in is your clear will actually overlap on top of your background color. And when that happens, when you look in, it looks like the cave is closing. It kind of lips over, which is a really cool look when you intend it, and a really awkward one when you don't. And I don't. So I want to make sure that there's a nice crisp clear line on the outside, and it's not actually working its way into the lens of the vortex and ruining your piece. A lot of unintended side effects will look cool if you intend them, but most things that you did not intend will look at least weird on your piece. So the dichro looks good. That white line looks kind of nifty. We'll see how this goes. All right, so now I'm going to create a spiral starting at the top ridge and going all the way around the piece to the very bottom. And I'm going to be using caramel or butterscotch. I think it's caramel. So you can see that kind of spirals all the way around. Kind of. It'll spiral more when we're done. So now I want to melt all those in. And then every dot that I laid down in the center of it, I'm going to lay a second color. I guess technically this is called dot stacking, but dot stacking is actually like making a whole piece out of the concept of laying one dot on top of the other or offsetting them slightly. And I'm not great at dot stacking. I've done a few pieces of it, but there are some artists out there who like that's their jam, and they're absolutely incredible at it. Thank you. Yeah, it'll look cool. It's just simplified. What I'm doing is just an easy version of it. And let's face it, it's the back of a marble. This isn't even supposed to be a focal point thing. But I've always kind of felt that marbles are they're two different art pieces in the same piece. A lot of times, you get whatever cool stuff you're doing on the back, and then when you look into it, you get that cool vortex. So it's good to put a little bit of thought and effort into each of the two pieces that make up your 3D art piece. All right, so those are melted in. So now I'm going to follow them around, and I'm going to put a little bit of red right in the center of each one. In that step, it's super important to be real precise when you're laying your dots, which is why you can see me like hunched over like 2 inches from the flame. But you don't want your second dot to go out of the lines of your first dot at all, and you want it to be as centered within your first dot as you possibly can get it. Keep the whole thing up, and then marble it out again. All right, so now we're going to twist each of those dots together along the spiral. So we're going to take our blue rod, because blue is the background color, so you're not going to be adding any additional colors. You're just going to be dragging colors together. And you heat 2 dots, stick this in between them, and twist it without dropping it. And then pop it off. And then move to the next 2 dots and do the same thing all the way around the spiral. You want to be careful not to get the blue too hot. If you get it too hot or you push this too hard, it can affect your interior design. And this, you don't want to mess your interior design up at all. So now you can see, well, no, you can't. You can kind of see how they spiral together. And you'll see this again much better in the pictures tomorrow. What it does is it creates 2 colors that spiral into each other as a disc all the way around the piece that goes to the center. That's one of my favorites. I don't like to pattern to put on the back of Vortex stuff. I think it looks really cool. And again, it doesn't need to be a focal point. So it doesn't need to be like the most amazing thing you've ever done in your whole life. It just needs to be pleasing to the eye and give the back of your marble some depth to it. So it doesn't just look like a blue or black back to the marble, which is fine too. But I prefer some kind of design over nothing. All right. So now it's time to take it off the thick handle, put it on a smaller one. I'm actually going to use a blue handle again. I don't actually want to increase the size of this marble at all. I'm pretty happy with it. So I'm going to pull that off instead of, gathering it in as I've done on previous marbles. We'll get this whole thing to marble out. And the Vortex design with the white line and the dichro and everything looks awesome. Now we're going to change the axis one time. Don't know that it's totally necessary on this piece, but better safe than sorry. Cold seal to the clear. Going to heat the bottom half, especially making sure to hit that spot where the previous handle was. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and take it off. Take one more handle on. It's going to be a super weak seal, so we can take this off. I want to let it cool for a second. It's kind of hard to see. And it'll show up better in pictures, but it's got a really nice dichro spiral to it. It actually came out better than I expected. So now I kind of want to hold it up like this, so I'm not putting too much strain on the on that seal. So really, really, really weak seal. So all I'm doing here is getting rid of the dent from the last seal and finishing off any last minute texture that I find, which I actually didn't find any. That's good. Now we'll let that cool. And you can kind of see the back. All right, so set that in the marble mold. Tap off the handle. Get rid of that tiny little scar that's left over. And that is it. Okay, so as usual, I sold myself short a little bit. That's okay. So that was the last project for today. If you guys, okay, so all the pictures of these pieces are gonna go up on my Facebook at Vulcan Glass Art Studio, so you can check them out there. I'll also be posting a video with all of these, slideshow of all of the pieces that were made in today's demo stream thing. That'll get posted up tomorrow on YouTube. So be sure to check one of those two out if you like those pieces. And remember, everything that we make on stream, super for sale. So if you really like it, check it out. And that marble is actually going to be going up for auction, probably starting at $20 on Black Market Marbles Facebook group. So if you're interested in that one in particular, you could probably get it for a pretty good steal. I haven't done auctions in a long time, so hopefully that'll go well. We'll see. Other than that, follow me on Facebook at Vulcan Glass Art Studios. Follow me on YouTube here. Make sure you like the video, like the stream thing, and subscribe. I'll be doing another stream on Sunday. That's going to be one of my pipe streams. I think we're working on a couple Sherlocks and then full wigwag minis. I'm gonna try to stack everything up ahead of time, and then we'll just be able to pull them down and put them together. And you'll see the process from blank to fully done piece, which is gonna be pretty cool. And then beyond that, I'll be getting some more tutorial videos up on the page soon. We had oxygen issues. My capacitor busted on my HVO system, and they replaced it for free right away. So we got that fixed in 4 days. It was awesome. HVO, they're great. Other than that, if you want to support the show further, go ahead and check us out on Patreon at Vulcan Glass TV. Become one of our patrons, and I will make you cool stuff on stream. Other than that, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope to see you Sunday. Have a good night.